Heyo. Hi, folks. It's Larry Gifford from PD Avengers, and here with my special guest from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, Dustin Watson. Dustin's been working on this legislation. You've heard about it, right? Yes, the legislation, the bill that will end Parkinson's once and for all. Dustin, congratulations. It's passed the Senate. It's passed the House. Pass it over to Joe. Where's Joe?
That's exactly right. We're very excited, and thank you for having me, Larry. I'm Dustin Watson. I'm Director of Government Relations, Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. I'm based in Washington, D.C., along with a handful of my colleagues from the public policy team at the Fox Foundation. And yes, we are super excited that after a 2.5-year campaign, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act has passed the House, it has passed the U.S. Senate, and it is on its way to the president for his signature. We hope that President Biden signs it soon.
Yeah, how long does that usually take?
Well, when you look at a description on any website, it usually takes about 10 days from which the bill is passed, but there's some rules and regulations that you would have to dig deeper into to get an understanding that it doesn't always work out to be 10 days. So we're probably looking at maybe the second or third week of June for the president to sign. Because of the rules and regulations around this, we really just don't know at this point, but it should be soon, and I think June is a safe bet.
Do they have like a big ceremony, or just like it's something he writes on his desk and there's a flyer that goes out and goes, he signed it?
That's another good question. It is really up to the president and the White House how he decides to recognize the legislation. Certainly with other bills that have passed, people probably have visions of the lawmakers and advocates surrounding the president when he's in the Oval Office behind the big desk, and he'll sign with various pens and hand those pens out to those who are in attendance. It is quite formal, it is quite special, but partly because this happens all the time, some bills don't go through that process. And
where do I get my pen?
That's a good That's a very good question. The president does need to sign the legislation. That is very clear. How public he makes that will be up to him and those within the White House. But rest assured, channels are into the White House now. We hope to make this as special as possible, and we'll keep everybody apprised as that moves forward.
What happens then? President signs it, then what?
Working backwards from the point in which the president signs this bill, the Secretary of Health and Human Services has 24 months to do an assessment of Parkinson's research.
It shouldn't take that long. Not that many people are spending too much money on it. I tell you that right now.
Exactly. And this was, I was a little concerned when I thought through, do I want to work backwards or forwards with it? 24 months to do an assessment through the Health and Human Service Secretary of everything, related to Parkinson's research in the federal government. From that point, the HHS Secretary will have to do an annual assessment. So we'll see an assessment every year once the first one is submitted. Has to create, for the first time ever, a Parkinson's Disease Advisory Council. And that advisory council is going to be made up of about 24 stakeholders, about 14 or 15 of which will come from the federal government. These will be federal agency representatives that work in the Parkinson's research space or should be in that space. And they will be joined by 10 non-federal stakeholders. These would include individuals living with Parkinson's, it would include researchers and clinicians, it would include care partners.
And that's really neat that they're including the care partners and the people with Parkinson's.
Right. So as I started and I said, well, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, he's got to do an assessment, he or she has to do an assessment within 2 years. Well, the catch here is you'd probably want to hear from your Parkinson's Disease Advisory Council as you put out your first assessment.
Yeah.
And so guess what? The Advisory Council has to make their recommendations through a formal report within 18 months of this bill being signed into law.
Okay.
So if the bill is signed into law, let's make the calendar easy. July 2024, right?
Yeah.
By December 2025, the PD Advisory Council will have to have made its recommendations to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and those same recommendations go directly to the United States Congress, both the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate. It's in the Secretary of Health and Human Services' interest to get that advisory council up and running as quickly as possible. And we would only encourage that, and part of our responsibilities at the Fox Foundation, along with PD Avengers and other advocates, is going to be just that. So when you say, what's next? We're going to be encouraging the administration to put together the PD Advisory Council meets as quickly as possible. They will be responsible for meetings quarterly thereafter. They will be responsible for meeting quarterly thereafter.
Cool. That sounds exciting, Dustin.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the inspiration for this bill, which was was it NAPA?
The Alzheimer's project, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the real visionary behind the Parkinson's plan was through my supervisor, Ted Thompson. He's Senior Vice President of Public Policy for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. He joined the foundation over 7 years ago. And almost since he first joined, he had this vision of replicating what Alzheimer's did over 10 years ago. They worked through the United States Congress, their national plan. And it was back in 2011 when the Alzheimer's plan was approved by Congress and moved through the system. The federal investment for Alzheimer's research, well, that's great, was hovering around 350 million with an M.
Yes.
Over the course of the past 10 years, since the Alzheimer's plan was approved by Congress, the federal investment for Alzheimer's research has more than quadrupled. It is nearing $4 billion.
3.8 was the last I saw.
Yeah, 3.8, where it was in the last budget, right?
And it's a little mind-boggling, but what they say is once we were able to put together a cohesive plan, it became a lot easier to fund. Boggling, but what they say is once we were able to put together a cohesive plan, it became a lot easier to fund. Let me do you one better. You said they were at what, 350 million?
Roughly. Mm-hmm.
And right now Parkinson's is about 250 million.
250, 270.
11 years later.
Yep.
Yeah, that's how bad it is.
Yeah, Parkinson's has largely remained stagnant in terms of the federal investment. And Larry, you know, the cost to the nation to care for individuals living with Parkinson's disease is roughly at $52 billion per year. That's billion with a B. But the federal investment is just 270 million with an M.
That's all right. It should be the opposite. It's upside down.
We need to reverse that calculation. You're absolutely right.
How did that happen?
You're absolutely right. So we worked with our lead sponsors. We modeled the Parkinson's legislation after the Alzheimer's legislation because that's exactly what we want to do. We want more federal dollars to go towards Parkinson's research. And you know, with more research, we are going to get that much closer to a cure. And this legislation is going to set us on a trajectory now for tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars going towards Parkinson's research. It's going to take time, just like it took time for Alzheimer's, but a model is in place that we can replicate and leverage from and be highly successful.
Wow, that's really exciting. I see, and Now that we have a model to go off of, doesn't it feel like, okay, we know what we're doing a little bit more than we would have?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, to look at a trajectory that Alzheimer's has succeeded over the past, it's almost a dozen years now or more. So yeah, we're going in with a level of confidence, and we want to leverage from that success and learn and grow from it. Yeah.
I had friends overseas go, I'm not too familiar on the US politics. What does this mean?
It means in terms of government efficiency, uh, those agency representatives who work in the Parkinson's research space, and these are very smart, dedicated individuals. But I think if they were on this meeting with us today, they would probably nod their heads in the affirmative by saying they don't necessarily talk with one another, they don't necessarily coordinate with one another, and this will bring those stakeholders together.
You guys over there at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, you're a small group there in Washington, but you are mighty, and you didn't give up, and you had relentless, fearless advocates on your side that you helped train. And so many people to thank for that. So I just want to make sure that we give them a shout out. And what do you want folks to do now that is passed to their lawmakers?
We want to thank them. And on that note, Larry, I want to thank the thousands of advocates that weighed in, that worked with us to train and to share their stories directly with their lawmakers. Over the past 2.5 years since we really launched the campaign, more than 1,500 advocates met directly with their lawmakers and shared their stories. We had tens of thousands of messages going in to congressional lawmakers urging them to pass this legislation, and these advocates were sharing their stories along the way. We have phone calls going in now. I know you distributed the link to the members of the PD Avengers just to say, look, click this link and just thank your lawmakers right now. This is a time to celebrate. It's a time to applaud. And it's a time to send sincere notes of appreciation, right? And as I mentioned, this is just the first phase. The next phase is going to be putting that PD Advisory Council together, working with the Department of Health and Human Services to get this up and running and encouraging them to do so. And then, Larry, an outline here is it's not just a magic wand that more federal dollars will go towards PD research. We have to continue with this momentum and have our advocates continue to weigh in on a regular basis. And we will let them know when that time is right. And we will continue on this campaign, not only this year, but in outlying years. But for the moment, the immediate thing to do is to say, thank you. And again, we could not have done this without the thousands of advocates that weighed in. I know I'm getting thank you messages literally from around the country and around the world. I know my colleagues at the Fox Foundation are receiving the same, but there's no way we would have gotten this far, this fast without advocates like those from the PD Avengers, those from the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council and beyond. I cannot express enough the thanks that really from the Fox Foundation.